The metal chair creaked under Commander Zethkara weight as she shifted nervously in the witness chamber. Her blue shell-like skin showed deep scars that ran from her shoulder down to her elbow. 3 of her 4 arms were wrapped in medical bandages, and the 4th one shook without stopping. The bright lights in the room made her large black eyes water, while across from her sat 12 members of the Galactic Council. Each one represented a different alien race from across the known galaxy. They had traveled far to hear her story. Some looked curious. Others looked worried. All of them wanted to know what had happened on the human world called New Georgia. Ambassador Wexler, a tall gray being with no hair, leaned forward in his seat. His voice was calm, but serious when he spoke. Commander Zethkara, you may begin. Your testimony. Tell us what happened during your mission to the human colony. Zethkara took a deep breath. Her voice came out as a whisper at first, then grew stronger as she continued. 6 months ago, I was given command of the 3rd Veltharian Strike Fleet. Our orders were simple. We were to capture the human colony on New Georgia and prepare it for full conquest. The humans were supposed to be weak. They had only just learned to travel between stars. Our intelligence reports said they had no real weapons or military training. She paused and looked down at her damaged arms. The reports were wrong, very wrong. The commander continued her story, telling the council about the journey to New Georgia. Her fleet had 27 ships, each one carrying 1,000 soldiers. They were the best troops in the Veltharian military. They had never lost a battle. They had conquered 43 worlds in the past 5 years. When we arrived at New Georgia, everything seemed normal, she said. The planet had 2 major cities and several smaller towns. We could see their factories and farms from orbit. There were about 500,000 humans living there. Our scans showed they had simple weapons, nothing that could hurt our ships or our armor. The attack began at dawn on the human world. Veltharian ships dropped from the sky like falling stars. They landed in the fields outside the human cities. Thousands of soldiers poured out of the ships, ready for battle. The humans ran, Zethkara told the council. They left their homes and their businesses. They abandoned their vehicles in the streets. Our troops walked into empty cities without firing a single shot. I thought the battle was over before it started. I was proud of how easy it had been, but something felt wrong to the experienced commander. In all her years of war, she had never seen a complete surrender happen so fast. Other species usually tried to fight back, even when they knew they would lose. They would send messages asking for mercy or trying to negotiate. The humans did none of this. My soldiers secured the government buildings and the power stations, she explained. We set up communication centers and began preparing landing zones for more troops. Everything went according to our plan, but I kept waiting for something to happen. The silence worried me. On the 2nd day, the silence ended. Zethkara's good arm began to shake as she remembered what came next. The attack came from underground. Humans burst out of hidden tunnels right in the middle of our camps. They had been digging beneath our feet while we thought we controlled the surface. But that was not the worst part. The council members leaned forward, wanting to hear more. The worst part was that they had been planning this from the moment we arrived, maybe even before we arrived. The humans had not run away in fear. They had moved to positions where they could fight us better. Every building they abandoned had been prepared as a trap. Every street they left empty had been turned into a killing ground. The human counterattack was unlike anything the Veltharians had ever faced. Small groups of human soldiers appeared everywhere at once. They struck quickly, and then disappeared before the aliens could respond. They used weapons that seemed to be made from everyday items, kitchen knives attached to metal poles, explosives built from farming chemicals, communication devices turned into jammers that confused Veltharian equipment. A human soldier named Jake Morrison led the defense, Zethkara said. We learned his name from intercepted messages. He was just a captain, but he commanded the humans like he had been planning this battle his whole life. His soldiers moved like they could read each other's minds. They appeared where we least expected them and vanished when we tried to chase them. The commander described how the humans fought with a determination that made no sense to our people. Veltharian soldiers were trained to retreat when they were outnumbered or when victory became impossible. It was the smart thing to do. But the humans seemed to have a different idea about what made sense in war. One human soldier held a bridge by himself for 6 hours, she told the council. He had been shot 3 times and was bleeding badly. Any rational being would have surrendered or fled. Instead, he kept fighting until our engineers had to destroy the entire bridge just to stop him. Even then, he tried to swim across the river to continue the battle. The most disturbing thing about the humans was how they treated their own wounded and captured soldiers. When Veltharian forces took human prisoners, they expected the other humans to want those prisoners back. Most species would try to negotiate for the return of their people, or at least ask for proof that they were being treated well. The humans did something different. They attacked the places where their own people were being held. They did not seem to care if their captured soldiers died in the fighting. In fact, some of the human prisoners told their rescuers to leave them behind and focus on completing the mission. I could not understand it, Zethkara admitted to the council. These humans valued their mission more than their own lives. They treated death like it was just another tool they could use against us. When we killed one of them, 2 more would appear to take his place. When we destroyed their weapons, they would make new ones from the pieces. By the end of the first week, Zethkara realized that her intelligence reports had been completely wrong about human capabilities. These were not primitive beings with simple weapons. They were something far more dangerous. Creatures who would turn war itself into an art form that no other species in the Yak galaxy truly understood. The commander looked up at the council members, her black eyes reflecting the bright lights above. That was when I began to understand that we had made a terrible mistake. We had not come to conquer a weak species. We had walked into a trap set by beings who thought about war in ways we had never imagined possible. Zethkara's voice grew quieter as she continued her story. The council members noticed that her damaged arm had stopped shaking, but now both her good arms were trembling instead. She stared at the metal table in front of her as if she could see the battles happening all over again. The second week of fighting changed everything, she began. We thought we understood what humans were capable of after their first surprise attack. We were wrong again. They had only shown us the beginning. The commander explained how our forces had regrouped after the initial human counterattack. Veltharian military doctrine was clear about how to handle guerrilla warfare. They would secure larger areas, build stronger defenses, and force the enemy to fight in open battles where superior numbers and equipment would decide the outcome. We pulled our troops back from the smaller outposts and concentrated them in the main cities, Zethkara said. We built walls and barriers around our positions. We set up sensors that could detect movement from miles away. Our commanders were confident that the humans would have to attack our strong points if they wanted to drive us off their world. But the humans did not attack the Veltharian strongholds. Instead, they began a campaign that made no sense according to any military manual the aliens had ever read. They started talking to us, the commander told the council. Not through normal communication channels, but through our own equipment. Somehow, they had learned to hack into our computer systems and our radio networks. At first, we thought they wanted to negotiate or surrender. The first message had come through the communication system in Zethkara's command ship. A human voice, speaking in perfect Veltharian language, had introduced himself as Captain Jake Morrison. He had politely asked to speak with the fleet commander. I accepted the communication, thinking he wanted to discuss terms for ending the fighting, Sethkara remembered. Instead, he began describing the details of our military formation, our supply lines, and our defensive positions. He knew things about our own forces that some of my own officers did not know. Morrison had not been trying to negotiate. He had been demonstrating that human intelligence gathering was far more advanced than the Veltharians had believed possible. The captain had ended the conversation by thanking Sethkara for her time and promising that the real war would begin soon. The next morning, we found out what he meant, the commander continued. The humans had been using our own communication networks to map our positions and identify our weak points. But they had also been doing something else, something that still makes me wake up screaming. The humans had been broadcasting sounds through the Veltharian communication system. At first, the sounds seemed like random noise or equipment malfunction. But gradually, the alien soldiers began to recognize what they were hearing. They were playing recordings of our own people, Sethkara whispered. Soldiers from our fleet who had been captured during the fighting. The humans had been interrogating them, and they were broadcasting the sounds of pain and fear directly into our communication network. The psychological effect on the Veltharian troops had been devastating. Most alien species kept their military communications separate from personal thoughts and emotions. But Veltharians were different. Their natural telepathic abilities meant that strong emotions from one soldier could affect others nearby. When my troops heard the suffering of their captured comrades, they began to panic, the commander explained. The fear spread through our forces like a disease. Soldiers who had never shown fear in battle suddenly could not function. Some of them stopped eating. Others refused to leave their positions. The humans had studied Veltharian biology and psychology, learning how to use their enemies' own strengths against them. The telepathic connections that made Veltharian soldiers so effective in coordinated attacks also made them vulnerable to psychological warfare, but the broadcasts were only the beginning of the human campaign. 3 days after the psychological attacks started, the humans began their next phase of operations. A human soldier named Lisa Burke led a unit that changed the entire nature of the war, Sethkara told the council. She was a staff sergeant, a low-ranking officer by human standards. But she had an ability that we had never encountered before. Burke and her team had been studying captured Veltharian equipment and weapons. But instead of trying to use the alien technology, they had been learning how to break it. More importantly, they had been learning how to make human technology work better against alien defenses. They began using our own medicine against us, the commander said. Burke's soldiers would capture our medical supplies and turn them into weapons. They took our healing chemicals and mixed them with human materials to create explosives that could penetrate our armor. They used our own communication devices to jam our signals and create false information. The humans had shown an adaptability that terrified their alien opponents. When conventional human weapons proved ineffective against Veltharian armor, they had improvised. When their own equipment was destroyed, they had salvaged alien technology and repurposed it for their own needs. We captured one of Burke's soldiers and interrogated him, Sethkara continued. He told us that their entire military training was based on the idea that they would always be fighting enemies with better equipment and superior numbers. They had been taught to think of disadvantages as opportunities. The prisoner had explained that human military doctrine assumed that any war worth fighting would be against a more powerful enemy. Therefore, human soldiers were trained to use creativity and determination to overcome superior force. The prisoner said something that I will never forget, the commander told the council. He said that humans do not fight to win battles. They fight to make their enemies wish they had never started the war. He said it with pride, as if causing maximum suffering to an enemy was a noble goal. The most disturbing part of the human campaign came when they began coordinating their attacks with the local environment. A human named Amy Chun, who had been a scientist before the war, had been studying the native creatures and plants of New Georgia. Chun discovered that many of the local animals could be trained to carry human weapons, Zethkara explained. She taught birds to drop explosives on our positions. She trained small mammals to chew through our communication cables. She even found a way to use local plants to create natural camouflage that made human soldiers almost invisible to our sensors. The Veltharians found themselves fighting not just human soldiers, but the entire ecosystem of New Georgia. Every animal, plant, and natural feature of the planet had been turned into a potential weapon against the invading forces. We realized that the humans did not see war as a conflict between armies, Zethkara said. They saw it as a contest between entire species. They were willing to use everything and everyone on their world to defeat us. They had turned their planet into a weapon. The commander looked up at the council members, her eyes filled with a fear that had not diminished over the months since her escape from New Georgia. By the end of the second week, we knew we were not fighting soldiers anymore. We were fighting an entire civilization that had been designed for war. The room fell silent as Zethkara paused in her testimony. Several council members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The Sharian representative, a being covered in soft fur, had gone completely pale. Even the normally stoic Nexian ambassador was showing signs of distress, his tentacles twitching nervously. The third week brought horrors that I struggled to put into words, Zethkara continued. Her voice had become flat and emotionless, as if she was reading from a report rather than recounting her own experiences. The humans stopped pretending to follow any rules of civilized warfare. They showed us what total war actually means. The commander described how the nature of the conflict had changed again. The Veltharians had expected the human resistance to weaken over time. Most species eventually ran out of supplies, lost the will to fight, or made tactical errors that could be exploited. The humans seemed to be getting stronger and more dangerous with each passing day. A human officer named Steve Parker coordinated what they called a civilian resistance network, Zethkara told the council. We discovered that every human on the planet, regardless of age or occupation, had been given military training. Children who looked innocent were actually scouts and messengers. Elderly humans who appeared helpless were manufacturing weapons and explosives in hidden workshops. The revelation had shattered Veltharian understanding of how societies functioned during wartime. In most civilizations, there was a clear distinction between soldiers and civilians. Military forces protected non-combatants, and non-combatants supported military forces through economic and social means. The humans had erased this distinction entirely. We captured a human child who appeared to be no more than 12 years old, the commander said. When we questioned her, we learned that she had been mapping our patrol routes for 2 weeks. She knew the names of our officers, the schedules of our supply convoys, and the locations of our ammunition storage areas. She had been reporting this information to adult humans who used it to plan attacks against us. The child had not been coerced or forced into this role. She had volunteered for it. When asked why she was helping the military, she had simply said that protecting her family and her world was everyone's responsibility. The humans had created a society where every person was a potential soldier, Zethkara explained. But more disturbing than this was their attitude toward capture and interrogation. Most species will eventually provide information under pressure. The humans were different. She told the council about a captured human soldier named Ben Rodriguez. He had been wounded during a failed attack on a Veltharian supply depot. His injuries were severe: burns across half his body, a broken leg, and internal bleeding that should have killed him within hours. "We brought Rodriguez to our medical facility for treatment and interrogation," Zethkara said. "Our doctors worked to keep him alive, thinking that he would be grateful and cooperative. Instead, he used his recovery time to study our medical equipment and security procedures." Rodriguez had spent 3 days in the Valtharian medical bay, appearing to be unconscious or delirious from his injuries. The alien doctors had believed he was too weak to be dangerous. They had been wrong. On the 4th day, Rodriguez escaped, the commander continued. He had been faking the severity of his condition while learning how our facility operated. He stole medical supplies and weapons, then burned down the entire building as he left. But that was not the worst part. The escaped human had not fled to safety. Instead, he had continued fighting for 3 more days with wounds that should have been fatal. He had used the stolen medical supplies to treat his own injuries, performing crude surgery on himself to remove damaged tissue and seal bleeding wounds. "We tracked Rodriguez through the wilderness for 72 hours, Zethkara told the council. "He left traps along his path that killed or injured several of our soldiers. He ambushed our search teams using weapons he had improvised from stolen medical equipment. When we finally cornered him, he was still maintaining radio contact with other human forces, providing them with intelligence about our search operations. The final confrontation with Rodriguez had required an entire platoon of Valtharian soldiers. Even then, the human had fought until his improvised weapons were destroyed, and his body finally gave out from blood loss. His last act had been to activate a small explosive device that wounded 3 of his captors. Rodriguez was not a special forces soldier or an elite warrior," the commander explained. "According to our intelligence, he was a maintenance technician who had received basic military training. Yet he demonstrated physical and mental toughness that exceeded our best special operations troops. The human resistance had also revealed an understanding of long-term strategy that went beyond anything the Valtharians had encountered. A human colonel named Patricia Lay had been coordinating defensive operations that seemed to anticipate Valtharian tactics before they were even implemented. Lee's forces responded to our attacks as if they had been rehearsing defenses against us for years," Zethkara said. "Every time we changed our approach, the humans already had countermeasures in place. Every time we tried a new strategy, they seemed to know exactly how to defeat it." The captured human documents had revealed the truth. Earth's governments had been preparing for alien invasion for decades, based on theoretical scenarios and worst-case planning. The humans had studied every possible form of asymmetric warfare, developed contingency plans for fighting enemies with superior technology, and trained their population for the possibility of species-level conflict. The humans called it xenocidal preparedness, the commander told the council. They had assumed that any alien species capable of interstellar travel would eventually pose a threat to human survival. Therefore, they had prepared their entire civilization for a war that they hoped would never come. This preparation had included not just military planning, but social and psychological conditioning. Human children learned about alien threats in school. Human entertainment media regularly depicted scenarios where humanity faced extinction at the hands of hostile aliens. Human scientific research focused on developing technologies that could be used for both civilian and military purposes. We realized that we were not fighting a primitive species that had been caught unprepared, Zethkara said. We were fighting a civilization that had been planning for our arrival since before we knew they existed. The most frightening discovery had come when Valtharian intelligence officers analyzed captured human equipment. The technology was not as advanced as their own, but it had been specifically designed to be effective against aliens with capabilities similar to the Valtharians. The humans had been reverse engineering alien technology for decades, the commander revealed. They had somehow acquired examples of weapons and equipment from various species across the galaxy. They had studied our strengths and weaknesses, then developed countermeasures specifically designed to neutralize our advantages. Human weapons were built to penetrate alien armor. Human communication systems were designed to resist alien jamming. Human vehicles were engineered to operate in environments that would disable alien equipment. We were not facing a species that was adapting to fight us, Sethkara concluded. We were facing a species that had been preparing to fight us for generations. They had turned paranoia about alien invasion into a strategic advantage that made them nearly impossible to defeat. The council members sat in stunned silence, beginning to understand the true scope of what they were hearing. The war on New Georgia had not been a typical colonial conquest. It had been a collision between two completely different philosophies of survival. Sethkara's hands began to shake more violently as she prepared to tell the final part of her story. The council members had remained silent throughout her testimony, but now several of them were whispering urgently to their assistants. The atmosphere in the chamber had grown heavy with tension and fear. The fourth week brought the end of everything we thought we knew about warfare, the commander began. The humans revealed their final strategy, and it was more terrifying than anything we could have imagined. She explained how the Veltharian command had finally decided to call for reinforcements. The resistance on New Georgia had proven far more difficult than expected, but additional ships and troops would surely overwhelm the human defenders. High Command had dispatched the 5th and 7th battle fleets to assist with the conquest. We received word that our reinforcements would arrive in 3 days, Sethkara said. I felt relief for the first time since the invasion began. Surely, the humans could not stand against 3 full battle fleets. We would finally be able to complete our mission and leave this cursed world behind. But the humans had been monitoring Galtharian communications. They knew about the incoming reinforcements. Instead of preparing for a desperate last stand, they had begun implementing what they called Protocol Omega. At first, we thought Protocol Omega was some kind of evacuation plan, the commander told the council. Human military traffic increased dramatically, and we detected large movements of personnel and equipment. We assumed they were retreating to stronger defensive positions, or perhaps trying to escape the planet entirely. The truth had been far more disturbing. A human general named Linda Hayes had been coordinating a plan that violated every principle of rational military strategy. The humans were not preparing to defend their colony or evacuate their population. They were preparing to destroy New Georgia entirely. We learned about their intentions when we captured a human engineer named Tom Wilson, Sethkara continued. Under interrogation, he revealed that the humans had been placing explosive charges throughout the planet's industrial infrastructure. They were planning to trigger a complete ecological collapse that would make the world uninhabitable. The plan had been staggering in its scope and cruelty. The humans intended to detonate their own factories, power plants, and mining facilities in a carefully timed sequence that would poison the atmosphere and contaminate the water supply. The resulting environmental disaster would kill every living thing on New Georgia, including the human population. We could not believe what we were hearing, the commander said. No rational species would destroy their own world just to deny it to an enemy. But the humans were not thinking like any species we had ever encountered. Captain Jake Morrison had contacted Sethkara one final time before the plan was implemented. His message had been brief and terrifying in its simplicity. He had informed her that the humans considered New Georgia to be acceptable loss in a larger war that the Veltharians did not even know they were fighting. Morrison told me that New Georgia was never the real target, Sethkara revealed. The entire battle had been a test. The humans had been studying our tactics, our technology, and our psychological weaknesses. They had been gathering intelligence for a counter-invasion of our home system. The revelation had sent shock waves through the Veltharian command structure. The humans had not been fighting to defend their colony. They had been conducting reconnaissance for an offensive campaign against the Veltharian homeworld. Morrison said that humanity had been waiting for first contact with an aggressive alien species. The commander continued. They had wanted to learn how we fought, how we thought, and what our capabilities were. New Georgia and its 500,000 inhabitants were considered an acceptable price for that knowledge. The human plan had been executed with mathematical precision. Admiral Sam Cooper's fleet had somehow acquired detailed star charts showing the location of major Veltharian worlds. They had also obtained technical specifications for Veltharian ships and weapons that should have been classified at the highest levels of military security. We realized that human intelligence operations had been active in our territory for years before the invasion of New Georgia, Seth Kara told the council. They had been infiltrating our systems, stealing our technology, and mapping our defenses, while we remained completely unaware of their existence. The final phase of Protocol Omega had begun as the Veltharian reinforcements arrived in the New Georgia system. The Human Colonial Administration had broadcast a message to the incoming fleet offering them a choice. They could withdraw immediately and never return, or they could witness the complete destruction of everything they had come to conquer. The fleet commanders chose to proceed with the invasion, the commander said. They believed the human threat was a bluff. No species would actually destroy their own world. But the humans did exactly what they had promised. The environmental collapse of New Georgia had been carefully engineered to occur in stages. First, the industrial facilities had exploded, releasing toxic chemicals into the atmosphere. Then, the power grid had failed, shutting down life support systems in the cities. Finally, the mining operations had been sabotaged, causing underground fires that would burn for decades. The humans evacuated only their essential personnel, Seth Kara explained. Scientists, engineers, and military officers were taken off the planet by hidden transport ships. Everyone else was left behind to die with their world. They considered this to be a heroic sacrifice for the future of their species. The arriving Veltharian fleets had found themselves in an impossible situation. The planet they had come to conquer was being destroyed by its own inhabitants. The human ships that remained in the system were broadcasting detailed information about Veltharian fleet movements back to Earth, providing intelligence for future human operations. We tried to stop the transmissions, but the human ships were faster and more maneuverable than our intelligence had indicated, the commander said. They led our pursuit craft on a chase that lasted for days, all while continuing to gather information about our capabilities. A final horror had come when the humans revealed the true scope of their strategic planning. The battle for New Georgia had been only one part of a comprehensive plan to deal with any alien threat to human survival. Morrison's final message informed us that Earth had been preparing similar defenses on dozens of human worlds. Seth Kara told the stunned council. Every human colony was ready to implement Protocol Omega if necessary. They were willing to sacrifice their entire interstellar civilization to protect their home planet and gather intelligence about their enemies. The commander looked directly at each council member as she delivered her final warning. The humans do not fight wars the way we understand them. They do not fight to conquer territory or capture resources. They fight to ensure the long-term survival of their species by eliminating threats completely. She paused, letting the implications sink in before continuing. They have weaponized sacrifice itself. They view extinction as a competitive advantage because they are willing to accept losses that would destroy the morale of any other species. They have turned their entire civilization into a weapon designed to fight enemies they have never met. The chamber fell silent as Seth Kara delivered her final judgment. Do not engage humanity in warfare. They do not fight to win battles or campaigns. They fight to win evolution itself. They have prepared for conflicts that span generations and are willing to sacrifice entire worlds to achieve victory. They are not just another alien species. They are something completely different, and they are more dangerous than anything the galaxy has ever seen. The council members looked at each other with expressions of fear and uncertainty. First contact with humanity had revealed not just a new species, but a completely different approach to survival that challenged everything they thought they knew about civilization and warfare. The age of easy conquest was over. The humans had changed everything.